Hi, this is Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr representing Rockville and Gaithersburg in Montgomery County, and you're listening to the Conduit Street Podcast, the official podcast of the Maryland Association of Counties.
Hello and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast. Michael Sanderson and Karrington Anderson are here, and we are ready for another round of what we're reading. Is it news or is it noise? We've gotten into a rhythm of wrapping each month with a quick roundup. Once again, we're going to run through some of the biggest headlines and figure out what actually matters. Some of these stories could have real implications for Maryland policy, politics, and the 2027 legislative session. Others may generate headlines today and disappear just as quickly.
And I think last time we talked about the special session, and if that was happening, mostly felt like a done deal. Now it's actually set to go and official.
Yeah, the details obviously set for the special session. We have coverage on our blog, but they're going to meet for a couple days in early August. And by the time some of our listeners hear this, it might even be over and done with.
I feel like we pretty much nailed that one by calling it news, but now the chatter seems to mostly be around the process for the special session.
Right. And so maybe that's the news or noise question to kick us off. The presiding officer sent a letter instructing the bill drafting office not to accept requests on anything other than congressional redistricting. Some people are treating that as a pretty big deal. Michael, you've seen it all. You've been through it all. Do you have thoughts on whether or not this is a big deal?
I guess I would say maybe in context, I think sending the letter saying don't even draft bills on other topics is itself kind of noise rather than news. And what I base that on is Maryland, compared to other states, or sort of in contrast with other states, we're pretty tidy with the way our state legislature, our General Assembly conducts its business. Far more often than not, we just have the 90-day session. At the end of 90 days, all the bills die. You got to reintroduce things next year and so forth. And that cadence really dominates our political scene here. We have other states that are constantly running over and they can't pass a budget and they come back multiple times over the course of the year. We pretty rarely do that here. And in the past, I mean, there's no ironclad rule, but when we've had special session called really over a single topic or a particular matter. I remember like once we had a couple days special session to deal with medical malpractice and another in the summer to talk about emergency legislation dealing with dangerous dogs and so forth. Like lawmakers really stuck to the issue that brought them back. And even if other bills got introduced, they didn't get a hearing. They didn't get a lot of process. It was just to come do this one thing or these two things.
So two things there. You're saying that this is really within their norm for them to have a single topic special session, which I buy that. Second thing, you're telling me that they came back to Annapolis to pass a bill about dangerous dogs, like dogs biting people, dogs at large. What's happening there?
Right. Yeah, believe it or not, like dog bites was like a super hot issue. This is like close to 15 years ago. It was in 2012. Which was a rough session for other reasons. They had to have a relatively quick special session to pass the capital budget and other stuff. But they also came back in the month of August to do emergency legislation just about dog bites, really.
It was a thing big enough for them to come back for this topic for a special session, not just in a normal session.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So this is like getting a little far afield for the county universe, but it's kind of interesting, like Maryland folklore, I guess. As I recall, what happened is there was a court case in the then Court of Appeals. Now it's the Maryland Supreme Court. And the courts ruled, I think this was maybe in the final weeks of the legislative session, this case came out basically saying that as far as state law seems to be written, pit bulls in particular are just an inherently dangerous breed of dogs. And so if you have a pit bull and you let it run around on your property, or kind of more importantly, if you're a property owner and you allow your tenants to keep or maintain pit bulls on your property, because the breed itself is dangerous, under Maryland law, we're going to declare strict liability applies to you. So if your dog bites someone, there's no back and forth about whether the dog had a history of being mean or a biter or being dangerous. We just skip immediately to that was a dangerous dog, and you carry the liability sort of immediately for that by virtue of you being willing to keep a pit bull. And that was a 4-alarm fire in the sort of like landlord community, saying, well, how are we supposed to police our tenants at that level and so forth? Like it was a big deal issue, big enough that lots of folks immediately sort of said, we're going to have to get this thing fixed. We can't wait till January of 2013. We got to get this fixed. And so they called a special session. Actually, it was also in early August. Wanted to have everything done before the Mako conference, right?
And was it done before Mako?
So, yeah.
What matters?
There's the punchline, is that even though the issue was hot enough to get a consensus that we need to convene and talk this stuff through, there wasn't enough of a political consensus on the resolution. So they ended up handling another issue that was part of the call for the special session, but the bills on dog liability didn't pass. And I think it actually took them until 2014 to get the whole issue ironed out and get all the liability issues untangled and so forth, to the satisfaction of the dog people and the lawyers and the landlords and all these different interested parties. So not a county issue, but it was hot political talk back in 2012, 13, 14.
Yeah, well, I don't want the dog people coming after us, Michael.
So anyway, so that's okay. Yeah. Side story. Right. Yeah, I'm not trying to dig us a hole, so to speak. Right. Anyway, but yeah, the central takeaway there, back to our news or noise thing, is really when the governor or the legislative leadership call a special session for a specific issue, everybody should correctly be thinking that really all the attention is going to be on that issue or that short list of topics. And even if the Constitution says you're allowed to introduce another bill, it wouldn't make sense to tell the world, well, I'm putting in that bill and we're going to fix that thing. I'm going to finally get my bill passed that I couldn't get over the finish line back in April. That's not what Maryland special sessions are for. And so the notion of we're not even going to draft the bills is just an extension of what we've always done. It's not really news.
Right. So, I mean, Michael, non-redistricting bills weren't going to get much of a process anyway. I think that's fair to say. So even if you're a legislator and you wanted to get a bill drafted, it's not a guarantee that that bill is even going to get a hearing, right? So the announcement that they won't even get drafted doesn't really change the outcome. I think that's what I'm hearing you say. And so At the end of the day, it's noise rather than news. Although for some people, they are very upset about it. But I agree generally, regardless of whether or not you get the bill drafted, it's very, very 99.9% that you're not even going to get a bill hearing if it doesn't have to do with redistricting.
Right. So, I mean, in the end, this issue is kind of sound and fury signifying nothing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this makes me think of something that we've discussed on here before and in our policy meetings, but the trend towards committees simply not voting on bills instead of having a committee vote and issuing an unfavorable report.
Yeah, I mean, I think, since I've been walking the halls here in Annapolis, I think when I first started, you would see some bills get reported unfavorable, but the overwhelming practice now and in recent years has certainly been, just put the bill in the drawer, don't actually vote it up or down, right? So that's drawing the bills instead of killing them is common practice now in Annapolis.
Right. And it definitely has not always been this way. I mean, I've done this for a pretty long time, and I go back to my early years as a legislative staffer. I was the staffer in the House Ways and Means Committee ages ago. And back in the day, committees would just routinely report out, late February, they'd report out 12 bills, and there'd be 2 favorable, 3 favorable with amendment, and 7 reported out unfavorable. Just, the bill is hereby defeated, and we took a vote, and the majority of the committee voted unfavorably on the bill. And that was the disposition of most things. Maybe there would be the occasional, you use that phrase, in the drawer. That's sort of insider speak in Annapolis for this bill is not going to advance to a voting session. So don't anticipate movement on the bill. It's in the drawer, quote unquote. In the drawer, it was a narrow or a thin or shallow drawer back in the day. Now those drawers have gotten a little deeper and wider, I think.
Yeah, the manufacturers have worked on that. But, I could see how that gets uncomfortable. Like, someone really likes the bill. They probably come to Annapolis. They take time off work. They pour their heart out at the hearing. If I'm a delegate, I may not love going on the record against these ideas that I probably do and might support under different circumstances.
Right. I mean, so instead of the committee voting no, the bill just sits. I mean, deadlines pass. And people like us have to deal, to read the signs. If it doesn't cross by the deadline, so it must be dead. I will also say, though, if you're a legislator that has a bill and you really care about the bill, it's almost better for the committee not to give it an unfavorable report, right? Because if you do that, you're kind of setting yourself up. You have a legislative record now that the committee's rejected the bill. So oftentimes I feel like sponsors would rather you just put it in the drawer than to actually give it an unfavorable report, because now there's a history that the committee has killed the bill before. So I think it goes both ways. But I certainly understand, Karrington, like if you're an advocate or, if you're a delegate and you really want the committee to discuss or debate and the bill just sits in the drawer, that can be frustrating. But again, I think there's an upside by not killing the bill and just leaving it alone so that you can then bring it back and you don't have this scar on the record that says, oh, the committee saw this bill last year and they killed it. They actually voted it unfavorable. Now it's just they never got a vote. It sat in a drawer. Maybe they didn't get to it. Maybe there was another reason, but it wasn't actually killed by the committee.
I mean, I think practically speaking, there's nothing but upside for everybody involved in the process to basically use the drawer strategy rather than actually putting everybody on record as no. Like the sponsor's happier. They don't feel like they have to go to that committee and turn around 21 out of 25 votes from no's into yeses if they want to bring their bill back. Right. So, I mean, in a weird way, the sponsors are happier. The committee members who otherwise would have to vote no to keep a bill from advancing, they don't have to do that. They don't have to go on record against these ideas that might be popular but untenable. I mean, the only people who kind of lose out are people who don't understand the process and are baffled. Well, my bill is still sitting in committee. It's April 2nd and there's 7 more days left in session. I wonder what's going to happen. Hacks like us who work in Annapolis and do this for a living kind of know it's all on the down low. We can write a blog article explaining what the crossover date means and so forth, but it's a little opaque for outsiders following the process. In some way, it's a little bit like, a governmental euphemism. I think of like maybe the most famous of all time was when government started saying mistakes were made as opposed to like we messed this up or somebody messed this up. So suddenly it was just like, well, a mistake happened. We put it in passive voice and there was no actor involved, just the mistake occurred. So in this case, like nobody voted no on the bill. It just died. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I understand why they do it. I think it makes sense. I don't always love it. I think the other side of this is that it can make an issue feel unsettled and might be one that you potentially have to worry about all the way up to sine die. Like even if it doesn't cross over, we have seen them still bring things up after that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like there are some bills that, deadlines don't matter and we see those bills, but I think the writing's pretty much on the wall with those bills, right? But I think the people that are sitting there waiting for their bill to pop out, 3 days before sine die are the same people who show up and they think their bill hearing starts at 1:00 and they're still sitting there at 7. I really wish there was a way to confer to all these people like, hey, this means this and your bill hearing doesn't start at 1:00 unless you're really lucky. But also if the bill's still sitting there and there's not any attention on it, don't expect a vote. So Karrington, I hear what you're saying. That sounds fair enough. Do you think news or noise on this generally?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trend is news. The silence around any one bill here is mostly noise.
I think it's probably the right way to slice it. I'm there for that.
All right, so moving on, Karrington, you wrote recently on the Mako blog about local health department funding, which gives me PTSD every time we talk about this because it has been a long, drawn out back and forth between local governments and the state, counties and the state when it comes to funding local health departments properly. It sounded like everyone would benefit from a clearer formula and some agreement about what the numbers actually mean. And I think you did a really good job, Karrington, breaking that down. So let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the PTSD is a consensus across the board for everyone. But this one, yeah, it's definitely news. I mean, although I do think it's the kind of news that makes people's eyes glaze over until they like someone sees the bill here.
I mean, it's like one of those things, like you don't want your name in the paper because it's probably bad things, right? This is the same sort of thing. If people are running around talking about your funding formula, it's probably because something went wrong or went sideways here. And I think this is one of those topics, right? No one wants to get into into the inner workings of a deep, detailed formula on how to fund public health, but we have to because it's kind of turned into a mess.
Yeah, exactly. So, Maryland has a core funding formula that governs state support for local health departments, and there's the county match there too. But the formula itself has never clearly been written into statute. So over the years, required funding, salary adjustments, and just other discretionary money has kind of all ended up flowing through the same budget line.
And we'll post a link to this blog in the show notes. But Karrington, all of that you just said, that made it really hard to tell what counted as the actual formula base, right? So if you're in the seat of a county budget person and you're trying to figure out what all these numbers mean, it's really hard to tell because they've never written it into statute, like what counted as the formula base and what is outside the formula.
So, different people working from different numbers. Counties cannot reliably predict what they would need to provide. And then the confusion became a real problem when local match requirements changed. And some counties had local matches doubling or tripling after their county budgets were already finished.
And this is one of these things where, like, we can be a little bit parochial and say, like, that's just, it's not fair to the county government to inform them in the month of July that, by the way, back in May, when you finished your budget, you were supposed to have done several $100,000 more for this function. But we're telling you now you messed up, so go fix your budget. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, gang, like the tax bills already went out. Like we already made all of our big fiscal decisions. We don't have $800,000 just lying around waiting for your memorandum. This is more than just a pushing pencil problem.
Yeah, it puts us in a tough spot, and it also puts local health departments in a tough spot. They need to plan staffing and services, and of course, counties need reliable numbers when they build their budgets. The state should clearly define the formula, identify which funds require a local match, separate the discretionary funding, and provide the numbers early enough for us to actually be able to use them. And I think something that's important here, and it might sound obvious, but really isn't, is that counties and local health departments would like to be able to replicate the formula, do the math, see the work, understand it, and no one can really do that right now.
Right. And I will say, I mean, on this, and Michael, something you just said, like, coming in July and saying, by the way, back in May, you really should have done this. This is something that I've seen more and more over the last few years where not just, the health department, but it could be for anything, schools, assessments, where the state comes back and tells somebody in the budget office in a county, hey, you should have done this. And now you need to go ask your commissioners or whomever for more money. And just think about for a second, a professional walking into a public meeting and having to go before the elected officials in their county and saying, hey, you know what? We need more money because I didn't budget for this appropriately, makes it sound like it's their fault. And so moment of personal privilege to stand up for our budget folks who have to go in and do that. And it seems like, again, more and more, that's not fair. And that's another reason for me why the state needs to get this in order and needs to make the formula in a way that everyone can understand. And like you said, Karrington, replicate. So I think this is certainly news because something needs to get nailed down before another budget cycle. And we need to stop this charade of, hey, by the way, reaching back out and saying, you guys really you messed this up because the formula wasn't clear, but actually we need you to go find another $500,000 or whatever. It's just, that's not fair. It's not right. And again, Karrington, I think this is absolutely news.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's not flashy. It can be hard to understand at a 101 level, but it does affect real services and real county dollars.
Yeah. I mean, the trend here feels obvious that this boring, nerdy stuff, when it pops up and becomes a real issue, it's usually because there's a relatively large number with dollar signs attached to it. And that's where we are. We're into the tens of millions of dollars in funding for public health being moving around, seemingly just coming out of a black box. It's time to get that sorted out. Most of these formulas and most of these programs are stable because they're written right into law.
Right.
And you can just read the state law and understand where the money came from this year and why it's the amount that it is. And then you can make a reasonable projection for next year because you can see what the components are in the math. And when you don't have that, you just wait for the memo, and that it's just not the right way to run a railroad. And like Kevin, with your broader issue there, let's put a pin in doing a session on news or noise and bringing in our colleague Sarah Sample, because some of these issues are in her portfolio in public education. And there's probably some fertile ground for us to cover there on some similar issues. So let's plan to do that in a month.
We can spread the PTSD around a little bit because I know that, like you said, Sarah does cover a lot of these issues where we have seen the state come back and ask for more money, and our people have had to parade in front of their bosses essentially and ask for more money. And it's just, you're right. We need to get this wrapped up and done the right way. But I agree, it's absolutely news. So I want to flag another item for both of you. The new task force to modernize county and municipal revenue structures holds its first meeting this week. This is going to be a big deal for local governments.
Yeah, this is a big one. Modernize revenue structures sounds like the sort of phrase that gets people's attention. It definitely occupies a lot of space in our brains.
I could tell you, speaking of space in our brains, I can't help it. Kevin, you and I did this meme at least a couple of times on the podcast, and I can't let it go. But every time there's something that's talking about taxes, I mean, we know taxes are something of a hot button issue, right? Politically, people have strong feelings, and there are folks who, like, their opinions about taxes drive their entire opinion about public service and budgeting and all that kind of stuff. And I always think of, there's this like legendary interview with Allen Iverson, NBA superstar, and they're asking him about like missing practice. And this is, he's already like an all-star player. He's got a ring on his finger or whatever. He's like, we're talking about practice, practice, not the game, but practice. And I always want to plug in the word taxes. We're talking about taxes, not the budget, taxes. Anyway, I don't know. Probably these days with AI, I ought to be able to make my own version of, maybe it's you, Kevin, in the AI pose saying it with that same inflection. I want to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, your day has come, Michael. Your day has finally come.
I don't have the artistic talent to actually make that video, but now we got bots who can do that, right?
Yeah, and look, there will be a ton of people running around saying this is just taxes, and it definitely gets people's attention. Mako's going to have a big role in this discussion. We have two county representatives, County Administrator Rich Madalino from Montgomery County and Howard County Councilmember Christiana Rigby. We'll present the county perspective at the first meeting, and of course, we'll remain closely involved as the task force works through local responsibilities, revenue pressures, and the very, very limited options that counties have today. And I think the starting point for counties is very straightforward. We know that our responsibilities and costs keep growing, but our local revenue options remain limited. And in the counties where most Marylanders live, the income tax is already at or near the state cap, right? So there's very little room to raise revenue beyond the property tax. Everybody hates the property tax. We've talked a lot about that. It's regressive. You have to cut a check in a lot of instances. So really the only place to go now for all the responsibilities the state wants to foist upon counties and local governments is to the property tax. And so something has to give. And we're not in there arguing for any specific, we want to tax the hell out of this person or that. We don't want to do that. We would like to have a way to put different options upon the table so that we can have a real conversation with residents. Hey, if we need to raise revenue, these are the ways that we can do it. Right now, it's just the property tax, and everybody's just going to throw up their hands and say no. But if we had other ways to potentially have these conversations, that would make sense. So that's what we're looking to do here, to get a real conversation about where things are right now, taking a look at the responsibilities, how much have those responsibilities grown over the years, and how are counties dealing with them, and what are we having to not provide in order to provide some of the new things the state wants us to provide. In other words, what money, what bucket are we taking money out of to put it in this new bucket, because now we have a new responsibility and no way to raise revenue to do it. So that's kind of where we are. And I think it'll be a fruitful group. It's a good group. They're going to meet throughout the interim and have some recommendations before the session. So this is something we're going to keep an eye on for sure. And we will report back on the podcast and keep everybody informed as to what's going on.
And Kevin, I think that's an important distinction that you bring up on state caps. Like, this really isn't just a conversation about raising taxes. It's about whether counties have the right mix of tools to pay for the services that residents expect.
Absolutely. I think you said it perfectly there.
Right. And in many cases, those services have effectively been delegated to the counties by state law. So in many cases, it's our state required obligation to pick up our end of the blueprint and to fund our share. Like we were mentioning, the local component to fund local health departments. And we have requirements under state law to kick in for libraries and community colleges and an endless array of different services. I guess like trying to frame this in our news or noise framing, like maybe we split the baby a little bit here. Like the task force itself being created, they're going to actually have meetings and get to work, which you don't do a lot of during an election year typically. Like its existence is news, but if you think you know where this lands and exactly what they're going to come up with, I think for the moment, at least, that's noise. I don't think we've got a clear sense. Like this isn't sometimes we see task forces, which are basically, let's polish the details on the preferred outcome.
Right.
This one is, we haven't kicked the tires on this for a long time, but we ought to do so. Right. So I think, like the exact outcome is noise right now.
Absolutely. And it absolutely is noise. And this is going to be a significant conversation as we head into the 2027 session. Like I said, we're going to cover it extensively. But Michael, you're right. It's hard to know where this goes because the state also is in a precarious spot and may need to raise revenue next session. We're going to have to do something with transportation eventually. And maybe that turns into some local authorities. And how does that play in with the work that this task force is going to do? There are so many moving parts when it comes to state and local revenue capacity and what's on the table. So I agree. It is noise if you think you know where this is going to go. But again, this is something that we're going to spend a lot of time on the podcast in the weeks and months ahead, and we'll see where this goes. But before we wrap up, I want to go to our resident expert on all things Philadelphia for one last news or noise segment. Karrington, LeBron James is officially a 76er. I think most people, the betting markets at least, thought at the end he was going to go to Miami, but he went to Philadelphia. Are the 76ers now the front runner to win the NBA title?
Yeah, I mean, so being a Philadelphia fan, I called that he was coming here, but of course, that's probably no surprise. But the signing is news. Calling them favorites, also news. It's a big deal.
You got Jaylen Brown too. I mean, it's not just LeBron.
I know.
Yeah, they're putting together one of these super teams. It looks like.
I don't follow the NBA super closely, but I mean, I will say LeBron James still like a very useful complementary piece to a good team, right? He's into his 40s, but he still can play a little bit like a big, and he can pass, like he still has good shot and so forth. Like he's not over the hill. This isn't a swan song, limp along sort of deal. He's a productive player. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he signed only a 2-year contract, so it's not like he's here for the long run. I mean, he is in his 40s, but he's still LeBron. I mean, he came to Philly because he wants to win, and it's way more, I think, than just the addition of LeBron. For me, it's the addition of Jaylen Brown from the Celtics, pairing up with Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe. I mean, I think it's more than just him, but it makes sense, I think, why he came to Philly. He sees that.
Joel Embiid, talk about over the hill. I'll go on a limb and say that guy, he can't stay healthy. I'm not sure I would include Embiid. It feels like
No.
I was 10 when Embiid came into this league, I swear. I wasn't. I'm the same age as LeBron, so it makes me feel terrible every time I see him slam dunking on guys. I remember in high school when I saw a picture of LeBron James, I was like, there's no way this guy is the same age as me. That's crazy. And he's still doing it. And he still is one of the premier players in the league. This guy is clutch. Yeah. But I'm a Tyrese Maxey. I'm a big Maxey fan generally, but I disagree. I will not put Embiid in that conversation. If the guy could stay healthy, maybe he's okay. But
no.
I agree. Maxey, Brown, LeBron, VJ Edgecombe, that's a pretty formidable team right there.
I think the thing is, so even if Embiid is 30%, I think they could still be a favorite. Embiid healthy, super dangerous.
Yeah. All right. So I will say I've already confessed I'm not a serious NBA fan. I will say as an outsider who I sort of listen to the sports, the sports ennui and Twitter sphere and so forth. I don't think there is definitely no other sport where everybody seems to have this confidence and precision that they know what's going to happen for the coming season. I'm hearing people the reaction mode to the LeBron signing, basically saying, like, with all this specificity, now this clearly advances the 76ers to the Eastern Finals. And I don't know if they can get over that hump, but they were previously just a first round and out team. And now with this particular change, I've rethought my like, no one does that in the NFL. I'm an NFL guy. I mean, you got 53 roster spots in the NFL. And even if you sign a new quarterback, a super impactful player, you don't suddenly say, well, now we know exactly who this team is. I just find that fascinating. NBA people all seem to be very confident that they know exactly how the strata of the league line up, just based on, well, do you have that third star, and do you have this exact sixth round, this sixth man, all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't get it. None of my sports seem to do that.
No, I mean, Michael, I think, like, to put it in context, I think that, like, for fantasy sports, right, you understand fantasy sports very well. I think it's much easier to project the NBA because you're just looking at minutes, and, you're not worrying about touches or how many targets is a receiver going to get. And generally, I think basketball has far fewer moving parts. You've only got 5 guards on the floor, and your best player or players is involved in almost every possession. So if you add an elite shooter or defender, people have a much better idea of how that changes the equation than if you add like a really good cornerback in the NFL, right? I think it's just far fewer moving parts. And again, the ability to just kind of project minutes and what it looks like. But I agree, like, nobody knows what's going to happen. But I will say the last time we saw a super team like this was the Miami Heat, and we know what happened. Yeah, so
I know.
I'm kind of buying into this. Like, I think that the 76ers are definitely going to have the Knicks number when it comes to playoffs. And you add a guy like LeBron, you're adding him for the playoffs, by the way. For sure. Like, this guy is clutch. So I feel like it's a big deal in the NBA world, but I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't think it's a done deal, but I do think if they can stay healthy, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think, only worry is having too many superstars, and that can create its own problems. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your biggest weakness, Karrington? Oh, I'm just too hard of a worker. This is perfect. Yeah. The only problem with the 76ers is that they're just too wonderful and they're too marvelous.
This gives Philly fans even more rooms to be obnoxious, and I'm here for it.
Karrington, does this fill the void in your heart now that AJ Brown is gone? Does LeBron James coming in just kind of fill that void for you?
No, I'm fine with the AJ Brown leaving, and it is what it is. He's already missing passes in spring training, so it's going to be enjoyable.
It's Devontae Smith time.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So as far as I'm concerned, what I heard is we have it on the record. Karrington says the drought is over. 76ers, lift the trophy. That's just news. So, I mean, I don't know. It'll be on record. If it doesn't age well, I think this one's at your feet, Karrington.
Willing to live with that.
And by the way, watch out for the Wizards, man. Ooh. The Wizards are doing things too. So watch out. We got the best rookie coming in, like, I think in a long time. This kid's crushing. So watch out for the Wizards. They're kind of doing their own thing. Obviously, they're going to have to get through the 76ers, but I'm going to make note of those Washington Wizards. They trick everybody every year, but I do think this year it's kind of real in terms of, like, they've gotten to the point in their rebuild where they're actually maybe capable of doing something. It's been a long time.
Shaking in my boots.
But maybe this is it. Wow. All right. Well, I'm just looking forward to hockey season, Karrington, so we can rip on the Flyers and we'll go from there. But we'll leave it for today. I think these are always fun, these news or noise segments, and I appreciate Michael and Karrington tagging along for this. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe. That way, all these episodes will be sent directly to the device of your choice. You can also follow along on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and then, of course, you should be reading the Conduit Street blog. We will post articles in the show notes on all the things that we've discussed, but we'll leave it there for today. For Michael Sanderson, Karrington Anderson, this is Kevin Kinnally signing off. We always want to give a big thanks to our esteemed producer, Chantel Malcolm Lim, and we will talk to you soon.